Yeah, so today we'll start in Genesis 24, verse 28, and then we'll get through that and probably all of 25. So, like a lot of the chapters here in Genesis, unlike when we did Revelation, it seemed like sometimes take us an hour just to get through one chapter. But through some of this, I mean, it basically tells the story pretty good. So there's not a whole like even today, there's not a whole lot of I don't know. I guess lessons and stuff. I mean, there's some built in here, some that obviously I wouldn't be smart enough to figure out and pull out myself after reading through it. It takes reading other people or listening to Rick do his thing to pull some of it out. But there's a few lessons in here, but a lot of good story. I actually have enjoyed this just because now knowing what a year or so ago when that Hamas attack over in Israel, and realizing like why is that always in a war over there? Well, it all comes back to the Genesis right here. I mean, it took Sarah's death that we talked about last week for them to actually get any own any land, of what will then be the future promised land in Israel. It took a death to get that. So it's just good to know, like, hey, like when you see that going on, well, yeah, because of Sarah's death, that's how they got their first piece of ground. Yeah, yeah, and it's going to be that way till the end. I mean, there's only going to be, we got one chair, Bear.
One chair, Bear.
Yep.
You got to sit there.
Yeah, I'll sit by where you're on.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes you forget
I told the
that
kids
Abraham was like
I
a
don't think
nomad.
they might be mad.
That's right.
Traveling here and
Yeah,
there and
a
back and forth.
lot of things that they call him. They called him a sojourner. I never used that
Yeah.
word because that's too hard for me to say. But a sojourner, where you're just going around traveling and being basically an alien in this land of Canaan up until Sarah's death, and then he was able to buy that piece of ground. And then I mean it will continue. The battles over this ground will continue all the way till the end. Until the only time there's going to be a peace over there is when the Antichrist signs that treaty sometime in the future, and then there'll be a peace over there for a little bit, short lived, and then he'll turn on it, he'll undo the treaty, and that's when the tribulation and all that starts. But so, like we talked last night after we were done with the study, we were talking about the differences in some of the Jewish history. You got your Messianic Jews, the other Jews, and like how they don't believe, but yet they're still the chosen people of God. And I'm like, I know they don't, Orthodox Jew doesn't believe in Jesus, but I'm like, when there's ever a war and stuff going on there, I'm going to side with them. I'm not going against them because it has never worked out for people before. So I always keep that in the back of my mind when you hear things going on over there, because here in America, we like to think the world revolves around us, but scripturally, the world revolves around over there, not us at all. All right, so we'll be here in verse 28 of Genesis 24, Bear. And so to recap of what's going on, and so I figured this out. So Abraham is the uncle to Rebecca, but Isaac and Rebecca then are cousins. Yes. So I even wrote that on top of my. I'm like, I got it figured out. So I was just saying it all wrong last week. So if you remember, Abraham's servant went out and said, "Hey, whoever gives me a drink of water, waters my camel, all that kind of stuff." Look at that nice guy. Don't get any better than that.
That was a beautiful.
So he found Rebecca, and then that's kind of where we left off, and then now he's going to go meet Rebecca's family and all that. And this is the servant. So verse 28 says, the girl ran, so the girl is Rebecca, ran and told her mother's household about these things. Now Rebecca had a brother named Laban, and he hurried out to the man at the spring. As soon as he had seen the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's arms, and had heard Rebekah tell what the man said to her, he went out to the man and found him standing by the camels near the spring. So I'm picturing this Laban here. He's seeing his sister coming in with all this bling bling, and he's like, hey, I gotta go meet this guy. Hey, this guy's probably pretty wealthy. I'm gonna get in good with him. This is what I'm picturing. he, picking up quickly with all the gifts that Rebecca's coming in with. We need to befriend this guy. So verse 31. Let's see, I lost it. Okay, come you who are blessed by the Lord, he said. Why are you standing out here? I have prepared the house and a place for the camels. So Laban is being courteous, gracious to him, welcoming. So verse 32. So the man went to the house, and the camels were unloaded. Straw and fodder were brought for the camels, and water for him and his men to wash their feet. Then food was set before him, but he said, and this is a servant saying, I will not eat until I have told you what I have to say. And then it says, then tell us, Laban said. So the servant here is being like, hey, I know you got all this stuff for me. You want me to eat, relax a little bit. And in this culture, it was rude to not eat food that was put in front of you, okay? But this guy's like, hey, wait a minute. I'm here on a mission. I need to get my work done. I need to get my job done before I just sit back and relax. He's basically saying, hey, I'm not going to be pampered until I'm done with what I was sent here to do. Being actually a good portrait of a committed, faithful, and a selfless servant. So he's not being like, hey, okay, I'll get to the business later. Let me go ahead and get this food to eat here and chillax a little bit, and then we'll go ahead and get down to business. He wants to get the business done, and then he'll worry about sitting, kicking back and relaxing. Because, I mean, he's on the mission for God, and he's not on a mission to just go there and eat and put up his feet and relax. He wants to get the job done for God. And then so Laban then tell us, Laban said. So verse 34. So he said, I am Abraham's servant. And so here 34 to like 41 is basically going to be a recap of what's been going on. Then the Lord has blessed my master abundantly, and he has become wealthy. He has given him sheep and cattle, silver, gold, men servants and maid servants, and camels and donkeys. My master's wife Sarah has borne him a son in her old age, and he has given him everything he owns. And my master made me swear an oath and said, You must not get a wife for my son. You must not get a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I live. But go to my father's family and to my own clan and get a wife for my son. Then I asked my master, What if the woman will not come back with me? He replied, The Lord before whom I have walked will send his angel with you and make your journey a success, so that you can get a wife for my son from my own clan and from my father's family. Then when you go to my clan, you will be released from my oath, even if they refuse to give her to you. You will be released from my oath. Okay, it's a big summed up in a nutshell of what Abraham and his servant here was supposed to go do. The only thing a little bit different is right there in verse 41 when he says, if they refuse to give her to me. So in the original one, it's if the woman refused to come with it. But here he's saying they, meaning the family. So if the family isn't going to let her come, then I'm released from my oath. And I think he put it that way, talking to her family, so he can point out to him like, hey, not really give her the choice, but like give the choice to the family. So I think it's putting a little more pressure on the family, like, hey, this is all ordained by God right here, and you don't want to go against God's will. So I think that's why he put they instead of why he said they instead of putting that if she didn't come back, made it up to the family for the decision. All right, so verse 2, we'll go through 42 to 48 here. And when I came to the spring today, I have said, O Lord God of my master Abraham, if you will, please grant success to the journey on which I have come. See, I am standing beside the spring. If a maiden comes out to draw water, and I say to her, please let me drink a little water from your jar, and if she says to me, drink, and I'll draw water for your camels too, let her be the one the Lord has chosen for my master's son. Before I finished praying in my heart, Rebekah came out with her jar on her shoulders. She went down to the spring and drew water, and I said to her, please give me a drink. She quickly lowered her jar from her shoulder and said, drink, and I will water your camel too. So I drank, and she watered the camels also. I asked her, whose daughter are you? She said, the daughter of Bethuel, son of Nahor, whom Milcah bore to him. Then I put the ring in her nose and the bracelets on her arms. And I bowed down and worshipped the Lord. I praised the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who had led me on the right road to get the granddaughter of my master's brother for his son. So as once again, a whole recap. That was nothing new that we didn't already know. But the biggest thing here is that he's wanting to point out that this servant here, that everything that he's prayed for, everything that Abraham has sent him out to do, everything that, even when he was like, okay, hey, I'm going to go to this well and wait for this woman to bring water and come get her water, and she's going to offer me a drink. Everything come true. And so he's wanting to prove to the family that God is in on this, okay, that this is a God thing. This isn't just me coming from some person you don't even know, some distant relative that you don't even know, and like we're just making all this up to get your daughter, your sister to come back with me. I think he's just wanting to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt to the family here that this is God working and not just him. All right, so he's got it all laid out. This is what's going on. So 49 here is going to be the moment of truth for him. So verse 49 says, now, if you will show kindness and faithfulness to my master, tell me. If not, tell me, so I may know which way to turn. And I think in some translation it says which way to go, like right or left. I think some of them say that, and we know what happens when you go left. So this is the moment of truth, kind of like the whole, I think it was George Strait song, Check Yes or No. It's wanting the family to pick which one that he wants. And on the marriage, okay, he's laid it out. You tell me now what you want to, what you're willing to let happen, the family. So so here's the point too. So there's been a lot of this Laban's in here. So this is Rebecca's brother, okay? And it's kind of like when I was reading through here, I'm like, well, where'd the Bethuel guy go, the dad of Rebecca? So apparently at this time, it wasn't uncommon for brothers to actually negotiate your sister's wedding. I guess they got along a whole lot better than my son and daughter get along, because I don't think that would fly. So, I mean, could you imagine if Grant was trying to negotiate a wedding for Morgan? I mean, you know what I mean? So, I mean, it just seemed weird when I was reading through this, but I guess, back here at this time that, it wasn't uncommon for that to happen, where probably the oldest brother, would do it. But the dad is going to return here in verse 50. But that's why there's a lot of Laban in here, because the brother is doing a lot of the negotiating. But in verse 50, it says, Laban and Bethuel, so the dad, answered, this is from the Lord. So they're agreeing like, hey, we get it. This is God here. We can say nothing to you one way or the other. Here is Rebekah. Take her and go, and let her become the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has directed. And verse 52. When Abraham's servant heard what they said, he bowed down to the ground before the Lord. All right. So when his prayers were answered, guess what he did? He immediately gave thanks. Bowed down to the Lord, just like we should do. And now a good example of people not doing this, to go to the New Testament, the I think it was 10 lepers, and only after Jesus healed them, only one of them come back and thank Jesus. I mean, that's always used right around Thanksgiving time, that story. So that's a good, the one leper is a good example, but the other ones are not. And here's another good example. Hey, when he got his prayers answered, his mission was a success. He bowed down before the Lord, and so he gave thanks to the Lord there. And then verse 53. Then the servant brought out gold and silver, jewelry, and articles of clothing, and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave costly gifts to her brother and her mother. So Laban is like, yes, all that work I was doing here negotiating this is working out good for me. Okay, so that we don't know exactly how much all this costed, okay, back in the day here, but it seems like a lot. It just says costly gifts, gold, silver, jewelry. She already got the nose ring and some other things and the bracelets earlier. Okay, but later in the law of Moses, God actually instructs Moses to limit the price somebody can pay for a bride down to just 50 silver shekels. And if you remember, Abraham bought that ground for 400 shekels. So later in the law, if you just keep reading back, I don't know where it come up. It just said in the law of Moses. But God actually tells Moses, hey, now put a limit on this being able to buy a bride. So wanted to throw that in there. Let's see, verse 54. Then he and the men who were with him ate and drank and spent the night. So finally, after the business is done, he decides, okay, now I can kick back, relax a little bit. I'm going to eat and enjoy myself and his servants that came along with him. And he did it only after his job was done. Before did he rest then? All right, so 55. The last part of 54, then down to 57. So when they got up the next morning, he said, "Send me on your way to my master." But her brother, that's the Laban dude, and her mother replied, "Let the girl remain with us 10 days or so, then you may go." But he said to them, "Do not detain me now that the Lord has granted success to my journey. Send me on my way so I may go to my master." Then they said, "Let's call the girl and ask her about it." So they called Rebekah and asked her, "Will you go with this man?" "I will go," she said. So the servants wanting to be like, "Hey, I got my job done. Let's get out of here. Let's get back and get Rebekah to Isaac." But the family, you can't really blame them. I mean, they're wanting just a little bit more time with their daughter, with their sister. I don't know how long in those days would they come visit, you know what I mean? Because it's probably not an easy journey. I don't know how far apart these city towns are, but I would say they're just wanting to try to, it's like a lot of the dude just shows up and say, "Hey, I want to take your brother, your sister, your daughter, go marry my master servant or my master's son here." Happening all here pretty fast, and they're probably just say, no, give us a little more time. But the servant is like, no, without delay. I want to get back to what I'm supposed to be doing. I want to get back to Isaac. And a delay to what God has called him to do, a delay in obedience for any of us, okay? If God is calling any of us to do something, but we want to delay it, that's not being obedient whatsoever. And we should not, so in this situation, like if we were the family, we shouldn't be standing in the way to make anybody else's call to God delayed. Does that make sense? We don't want to delay ourselves. God's calling us to do something. We don't want to take the detours, like Abraham and Sarah did. We don't want to take the detours. We don't want to delay it. You know how I've said people with their salvation and that, hey, this whole Jesus stuff, I might learn that, but just not today. And then you can just keep putting God off, just not today, and pretty soon you just not today'd yourself right into hell. And same way with the obedience to God. He might be telling you to do something. Just take a mission trip. I had a friend here at church. They just got back from a mission trip. I've never felt a call to go on a mission trip yet, but I'm just saying if God's ever put that in you, you delay your obedience. That's not being obedient whatsoever to God. You should be doing it just like this servant here is like wanting to leave with Rebekah to get back to Isaac without any delay. And then also like the family is saying, "Hey, and I can understand, I want a little more time with my daughter," but they're delaying what God's wanting to happen. So we shouldn't be delaying anybody else's plan that God has for that specific person. the biggest point on that is that, you know, delay in obedience is not obedience at all if you're trying to delay it. So, all right, so verse 59. So they sent their sister Rebekah on her way, along with the nurse and Abraham's servant and his men. So it's quite a crowd here. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, "O sister, may you increase to thousands upon thousands. May your offspring possess the gates of their enemies." All right, so that little blessing right there, a prayer if you want to call it, it's basically conforming right in with God's promises to Abraham. You know, you're going to be father of many nations, many people. So, and you know, right here it says you may increase thousands upon thousands. So it seems like because they are relatives, and like I said, I don't know how far apart they are, but it seems like they know quite a bit already about Abraham somehow or another, because it seems like their prayer fits exactly right along with what Abraham and God's covenant was. Seemed to, I think I know where that is. I think it was in chapter 12. Yeah, so in chapter 12, the verses 2 and 3, it's the covenant between Abraham and, Abram at the time, and God, talking about being a blessing to nations, and I'll make you a great nation. And people who curse you, God's going to curse. And I think that goes right along with the second part of this. May your offspring possess the gates of their enemies. Just like Abraham, or God said to Abraham, if somebody curses you, I'm going to curse them. So like I said, they must have known all about it. Abraham was an important guy. He was a rich guy. And I'd say they knew quite a bit about him. And it sounds like they also believe in the covenant too. Like, hey, yes, Rebekah, go be increased to thousands, you know, your offspring. They weren't just saying that, oh, I hope this happens. No, it says it's going to happen. So verse 60, 61 through 65. Then Rebekah and her maids got ready and mounted their camels and went back with the man. So the servant took Rebekah and left. Now Isaac, had come from Beer-Lahai, for he was living in Negev. He went to the field one evening to meditate, and as he looked up, he saw camels approaching. All right, so we don't really know what he's meditating on. I'm just kind of assuming, like, he's probably, since he knows this servant's been out looking for him a wife, I'm assuming that's probably what he's meditating over, praying over. And actually this word for meditate, we actually really don't know exactly what that word is in Hebrew. The meaning's kind of uncertain. So it could be mean praying, worshiping over, meditating, something along that line. For this day, like he sees these camel coming, so I bet he's been meditating over, trying to bless this journey of the servant. Like, hey, I hope he finds me a good wife, pretty wife, one that's gonna, be the godly woman that she's called to be. So I have a feeling that's what he was doing out here in the field. And then so 64, it says, Rebekah also looked up and saw Isaac. She got down from her camel and asked the servant, who is that man in the field coming to meet us? He is my master, the servant answered. So she took her veil and covered herself. And that was, proper at the time, covering themselves before the wedding. But right there's where I wanted to point out. It says, the servant says, he is my master. And if you remember, just a chapter or so ago, he said that to Abraham. So this is that transition, that Abraham's on his way out. Isaac is now going to be basically the main character. And it seems like Abraham has taught Isaac well, too, through all this, that teaching him in the faith that, hey, trust in God, because, he took them detours with Sarah, but in the end, he knew the blessings between Abraham and Sarah was going to lead through Isaac, and so Isaac, I think, is starting to believe it after Abraham's teaching it. Just like, we should be passing our faith down to our children. So if Abraham's on his way out here, getting old, about ready to die, Isaac's seeing it, but he's learned from Abraham, especially from the mistakes too that Abraham has had. But Abraham's passing his faith on to Isaac, like I said, just like we should be doing to our children. So like when we're dead and gone, we shouldn't be worrying about our kids at all. Like they have the foundation, they have the cornerstone, I guess so to say, in the building, that they can be well planted in their faith. So verse 66 and 67. Then the servant told Isaac all he had done. Isaac brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he married Rebekah. So she became his wife, and then this is a good part here. And he loved her, and Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So this is that and he loved her. The first time we directly hear, okay, it's all been inferred before, Adam and Eve, Abraham and Sarah, but it's the first time we actually directly hear about a husband loving towards his wife. Okay, like I said, it's always been inferred, but it's never just come out and said, oh yeah, Abraham loved Sarah. Well, here it says Isaac loved her. So it's just something neat to point out there. Let's see. All right, that's all I got on the 24. Anybody want to add anything to it? Take away? Yeah, absolutely, Russell.
I take it as when Isaac was meditating. When I think of meditating, I kind of think of like prayer.
Yeah, meditate. Yeah,
So maybe Isaac was meditating for a wife,
yeah,
because then the servant came back and told Isaac what he did.
yeah.
You know, maybe Isaac didn't know
So you say he might not have known what the servant was out doing? Yeah.
that Abraham sent him off to
Mm-hmm.
find him a wife.
Yeah. Yeah, very possible. And I mean, I think that's why it's put in there. 'Cause, I mean, I don't think he was just saying he's meditating over anything. You know what I mean? I'm pretty sure it was for this situation exactly of what's coming. The wife, whether if he knew the servant was going out or not, you know, like, hey, I need my godly wife, you know, to come along beside me for sure. Anybody else got anything on it? Russell's the only one brave enough to talk. I like it.
What about the nose ring back then?
Yeah, I kind of was curious about. Is that like a legit nose ring? You
I
think?
don't know.
That's why they wanted to keep
Or
her
was
10
it
days, so
boring?
make sure it didn't get infected.
Yeah. Make sure she got the Neosporin. Take the
Is that what
ivermectin.
it-
They probably had ivermectin back then. They could
I'm
just
picturing
smear it
like
on
a
it.
bull ring, like
Yeah.
Right.
when he said he put it on, I'm like,
Was there
jumping the
something
fence.
significant about that back then, or what?
So I mean, what I read, no, I didn't see
I didn't
anything.
see anything in there either.
No.
Side note.
So I mean, and maybe it's kind of one of those things like, oh, the Nephilim are here, so okay, they put a nose ring in it. Like maybe Moses was saying, like we should, like to him, it's probably nothing spectacular. To us, we're like, what is that? You know what I mean? So yeah,
Maybe it's a control thing.
God, well,
you
so
know, like when you put a nose ring in a bull.
in a bull, that's what it's for.
That's what I thought.
Long chain hanging.
Yeah.
Don't jump the fence.
Yeah, so they step on it, pull their head down. But and I mean, she got the braid, so maybe it's just. I mean, who knows what it is?
It's
I mean,
it's a gold nose ring. It's ceremonial thing or whatever I'd say.
yeah, but
Just a good gesture. Yeah, she's mine.
yeah, but
You put it-
Maybe that's what it is.
You put
It's a
her-
claim, like this is mine. She's not.
Claim, yeah.
She's not for.
There's a form of a wedding ring, maybe.
put his band
oh
on.
yeah, like an engagement
Put his
ring.
band. I
That's
mean,
what it was.
band. You know.
Yeah.
Put it-
Yeah, that's possible.
Well, I like the idea of a ring a whole lot better than, or a ring on your finger than through the
I'll
nose.
ask Al next time I see her. Could you imagine Randy coming up to you and putting a nose
Nose?
ring in you?
Yeah, she'll be like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Put one of them in a bowl. And you just snap in there.
We've never have. We've been fortunate enough. Luckily, our bulls.
We done with some bulls like years ago.
Yeah.
Put the permanent one in there.
Yeah.
Just
That,
snap it in there, put a little screw in there, and hold it tight.
the dairy farm that I worked at, they always, because I guess dairy bulls
They're
always,
mean,
yeah,
always
got
mean,
always more
Jersey.
mean. Because Charlie always had nose ring in the bulls.
Jersey's meaner is than the
Oh.
Holstein.
All right, so 25 here. We're gonna learn the death of Abraham, and then we're gonna officially go on to Isaac. But then we're gonna have a little bit about Ishmael here in here too. So quite a bit going on in 25. And like I said, not a whole lot of life lessons, I guess so to say, but still good stuff to know genealogy wise.
I found some stuff on the nose ring.
Do it. All right, what you got?
So it says nose rings were a form of female attire and a sign of wealth and status. Hebrew women often wore a ring through their right nostril. The rings were made of gold or silver and sometimes had jewels, beads, or coral.
Nice. So a sign of wealth more.
Yeah.
Well, in which Abraham,
So it
yeah.
might have been because she was going to be marrying Isaac.
yeah. Yeah. Cool. All right, so in chapter 25 here, Abraham's obviously getting really old, but we learn a little more about his last few years. So verse 1, Abraham took another wife whose name was Keturah. And I've actually knew a Keturah growing up, and I thought that was kind of neat. I knew her name come from the Bible because it's a real religious family, but I didn't exactly know where. She bore him Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Median, Ishbak, and Shua. Jokshan was the father of Sheba and Dedan. The descendants of Dedan were the Asherites and the Latishites and the Lumanites. The sons of Medan were Ephah, Epher, Hanok, Abidah, and Eldah. All these were descendants of Keturah. Okay, so it was fine. You know, this is not a detour of God's way. Okay, because Sarah, is dead. It was fine for Abraham to remarry. And a lot of what I read, they call Keturah a concubine. Well, then I had to look up what a concubine was because I didn't really know what that was. So it basically means it's a legit wife, but a little lower status than like your first original wife. So in this case, she was like a lower status wife of what Sarah was. And most believe that this Keturah lady was probably someone Abraham already knew, like a maidservant, or somebody within his clan, his group. All right, so verse 5. Abraham left everything he owned to Isaac. Okay, and let me just go back to one chapter, in chapter 24, verse 36. It said, "My master's wife Sarah has borne him a son in her old age, and he has given him everything he owns." So this is just a double assurance that Isaac is getting his everything that he's deserved. Okay, through God here, through the covenant. It says Abraham left him everything he owned, but Abraham being the good dad, he's still gonna give gifts and whatnot to the children here. So verse 6, "But while he was still living, he gave gifts to the sons of his concubines and sent them away from his son Isaac to the land of the east." Okay, even though this offspring was from Keturah, okay, they're going to become prominent people, like up there in the earlier verses, the Lumanites, Latishites. So they're still going to be a prominent people. So Abraham, knowing that they're probably going to still be important, sent them on their way, okay, to the land of the east. I have a feeling because he knows the covenant is through Isaac, but I have a feeling he just wanted to get the competition out of the way. So there's not going to be no squabbles here, no trickery, anything like that. And this Isaac is a representation here of the redeemed people. Okay, Isaac's going to lead us to Jesus, and he's being separated, okay, from the others. His I guess they're half brothers, how that goes. And those are representative of the unredeemed. Okay, they're being separated from each other here. All right, so verse 7. Altogether, Abraham lived 175 years. So that's a pretty big age, because the ages have went down since the flood. So 175 is actually quite a bit. Then Abraham breathed his last and died, and it says, at a good old age, an old man and full of years. And he was gathered to his people. So age, he was a good old age and an old man full of years. So it seems like age was not a burdensome to Abraham, okay? And also Abraham was not a burdensome to the world, even in his later years. He was an old man full of years. And then this last part, it says he was gathered to his people. Now I'm just going to read this, and then I got a few verses in the New Testament to go to it, because I don't quite understand it, so I thought maybe you guys could. So according to MacArthur, this gathered to his people, it is an expression of personal continuance beyond death, which denoted a reunion with previously departed friends. Anybody know what that means?
They still celebrated your birthday after you was dead.
And then, and I take it like you'll get to see people after death, like an expression of personal continuance beyond death, which denoted a reunion with previously departed friends. So like people that's died before him, he's going to have a continuing reunion with them. So let me just go to a few New Testament verses, because this phrase comes up again about gathered to his people. So Matthew 8:11 says this. Let's see. Make sure I'm right. I say to you that many will come from the east and the west and will take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. So I have a feeling this gathered to his people, that this is going to be looking forward to like a reunion with them.
It says here as a side note.
Yeah, what's his side note say?
Back now, where was that? Said it was speaks of blessed reunions in the life to come.
Okay,
That's
so
what
like
he's talking
eternity.
about,
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying. So this Hades, I don't know if everybody was in here when we talked about Hades, but in the Old Testament it's called Sheol. Is also another name for it, was called Abraham's bosom, and that's some stuff about the afterlife. I don't want to explain it because I don't really understand it all. But Abraham's bosom was used for a description of afterlife things. I don't remember if it was the lower part, the good part, or the bad part. But I do have one other thing that talks about a reunion to go along with like what Mark was there saying. Luke 16, 22 and 23. All right, Luke 16, 22 and 23 says, the time came when the beggar... Okay, so here's part of that, because this is in the rich man and Lazarus story. The time came when the beggar died, and the angels carried him to Abraham's side. And I think some of it says to Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried in hell, where he was tormented. He looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. So he called to him, Father Abraham, have pity on me, and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I am in agony in this fire. And then it goes on to say, if you don't know that story, the rich man Lazarus, the rich man basically went to hell, Lazarus to heaven, and he could see, the rich man down in hell could see Abraham across this chasm between the two. And actually, that's one of the most details that we get of the afterlife stuff there. But so there's, I guess Abraham's sitting there waiting on all of us to get there. It's basically all I can get out of that is he's gathered to his people. I tried to find more about it, but that's really I kind of like the way David Jeremiah really explains it the simplest right there. All right, so verse 9. His sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah near Mamre in the field of Ephron, son of Zohar the Hittite. So that's what we learned about. It was that either last week or the week before. He bought that cave in the field and all that. So he's buried there next to his wife. But right there in verse 9 it says Isaac and Ishmael. So if you remember... the mocking that was going on between the two, and that was back in chapter 21, verse 9. So maybe there's been a little reconciling between the two, or they just happen, like, sometimes that happens at our funerals and weddings, family get along just for the one day. So it could be either one of those.
Yeah, because he was sent off.
Yeah,
Abraham
that's right.
sent him off.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's what the last part of verse 8 is referring to. The gathering of his people.
All people come back for
People come
basically
back.
the funeral. Yeah, there you go. That's good, Richard.
Both of them took off
Yeah.
with him and buried him in a special place.
Yep, very good. All right, so the last little bit of this, verse 10, the field Abraham had bought from the Hittites, there Abraham was buried with his wife Sarah. After Abraham's death, God blessed his son Isaac, who then lived near Beer Lahai Roy. All right, so we got that. Now we're going to get into some of Ishmael's sons. This is going to be a lineage, basically to record, to confirm that God's promise of the 12 rulers to Ishmael. So, if you don't remember, Ishmael was promised 12 rulers as well, and that's in chapter 17. That was in 20 and 21. It said, and as far as Ishmael, I have heard you. I will surely bless him. I will make him fruitful and will greatly increase his numbers. He will be the father of 12 rulers, and I will make him into a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, from whom Sarah will bear to you by this time next year. So, sometimes that can be overlooked that, hey, forget about old Ishmael. He was actually promised, to be a great nation as well. And then here we're going to get his lineage, his 12 rulers in this little blurb here. So verse 12. This is the account of Abraham's son Ishmael, whom Sarah's maidservant Hagar the Egyptian bore him. And this is, remember, the detour that they took. And sin always matters. These are the names of the sons of Ishmael listed in the order of their birth. So the Neboi, the firstborn of Ishmael, Kedar, Adbeel, Mibzabam, Mishmam, Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Jeter, Naphish, and Kedama. So that's 12. My finger's going to go as fast, but it's 12. Verse 16. These were the sons of Ishmael, and these are the names of the 12 tribal rulers according to their settlements and camps. Altogether, Ishmael lived 137 years. He breathed his last and died, and he was gathered to his people. So there again, he's gathered to his people. And now we don't know, like, hey, was Ishmael a righteous man or not? Maybe he's the gathering of the people down south. I'm not really for sure. His descendants settled in the area from Havilah to Shur, near the border of Egypt, as you go towards Ashur. And they lived in the hostility, now get this, and they lived in the hostility toward all their brothers. Because why? Sin always matters, and these people are going to be a pain in the neck for Israel.
The other people in the area, or they mean hostile, the 12 brothers was hostile towards each other?
I'm going to say they're both hostile to each other, to their own brother, but then to their half-brother, Isaac's sons, is what I'm gathering. It's what I would say. I would say that, they ain't gonna like each other. They're gonna fight amongst themselves too.
Yeah.
But then also Isaac and pretty much anybody around. So that, there in 18 it gave a description, settled in the area from Shur to the borders of Egypt. So this is the Arabian area. I think so. Like today, these are Arab people. The people of Ishmael is the what we have nowadays, the Arabs. And Arab tradition, okay, has it that these are their earlier ancestors. So you go back through like Arabs' history books and all that. So their tradition always goes back to these 12 tribal rulers that I wrote here in Genesis. And so, in addition to serving as a testimony to God's promises, okay, this, because it's written out what God said earlier, this genealogy helped Israel, the nation of Israel, the people of Israel, the Hebrew nation, to understand the origins of their neighbors. So Arab is going to be right there neighbors to Israel and understand, because later on, when genealogies fade, you forget who your great-great-great-grandfather is. Israel can go back and be like, oh, these are all Ishmael's sons. So you got Israel's history leading back to these, knowing who their neighbors are, and then also the Arab people. Like I said, their history shows that they all come back from these 12 here. That's pretty cool how nowadays, like even our history can be, people that's kept up with the history books can be traced back. and it says tradition, so I'm assuming maybe it's not all wrote down. It's just been like oral tradition. But still, it's nice to know that it comes back to Genesis here. All right, so now we'll get into Jacob and Esau. All right, this is the account of Abraham's son Isaac. So we had Ishmael's line. Now we're going to get Isaac's line. Abraham became the first father of Isaac. Not the first, became the father of Isaac. And Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah. So we finally get how old he was when he married. Daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean from Padan Aram, and a sister of Laban, the Aramean. All right, 21. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. So here we go. We already got the same problems Abraham and Sarah had. So Rebecca had the same barren issue as Sarah, married at 40, and she is not going to have any kids until she is 60. That we'll find out here later. And so what does Isaac do? Okay, he didn't go take the detour that Abraham and Sarah that come up. He didn't go take that. So Isaac prayed. I mean, he went straight to the source. He was interceding for his wife. You know, they say Jesus is up there in heaven interceding for us. Why the devil's trying to accuse us, Jesus is interceding. Well, Isaac here is helping to intercede for his wife, and not only praying for her, but praying with her. And where has he learned this? From Abraham. Okay, Abraham taught him, like I said earlier, you know, from some of the lessons that he learned about, you know, doing the detour. Isaac has learned that, and trust in God's way and in God's timing. Our timelines, okay, are usually always wrong, but God's timeline is always right. We might not like God's timeline, but his timeline is the right timeline. And Isaac has learned this from Abraham. And that's what I said earlier. We need to be teaching our kids or our future kids or our future grandkids to have that steadfast of faith to where you can just trust in God and leave them a good foundation in the faith, especially when things aren't going your way or as fast as you want them to have them. Because they were married at 40 and it's taken them 20 years to have kids. I'm sure they were getting pretty disgusted about, hey, you know, what about this promise? So Isaac went straight in and just prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife. All right, so prayed to the Lord on the behalf of his wife because she was barren. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. The babies, and get that, babies, jostled each other within her, and she said, "Why is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. So she's doing the same thing. A godly woman that went straight to the Lord, okay? Because she's learning from probably her dad, that Bethuel guy. Laban seemed to be a pretty legit dude, her brother, and then now Isaac. So she's learning. She's male figures. We're supposed to be people of God. You know, a man's man is a devout follower of Christ, and that's who we should be. So our family can learn from us. So she went to inquire of the Lord. And then in verse 23, the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other." And then this is backwards right here. "And the older will serve the younger." So in that time, tradition, that's never the way it was. The younger always served the older. But guess what? God don't have to follow tradition. He like I said, his way and his timing are always correct, whether what tradition or anything tells us. I got Romans 9:10 through 14 talks a little bit about this. Romans 9:10 through 14. It says, "Not only that, but Rebekah's children had one and the same father, our father Isaac. Yet before the twins were born or had done anything good or bad, in order that God's purpose in election might stand, not by works, but by him who calls, she was told, The older will serve the younger, just as it is written, Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. And then in Malachi talks about the two too. Malachi's like 2 pages. Right in here somewhere. Oh, hey, look, I had it marked. No, I didn't. All right, Malachi 1, 2, and 3 says, I have loved you, says the Lord, but you ask how you loved us. Was not Esau Jacob's brother? The Lord says, yet I have loved Jacob, but Esau I have hated, and I have turned his mountains into a wasteland and left his inheritance to the desert shackles. And it goes on. So there's 2 spots where it's talked about them two. So obviously these 2 brothers are probably not going to be getting along very well from what you read. And we'll find out as we go through Genesis here. All right. So verse 24. And that's why it talks about 2 nations. So Esau is going to go one direction. Jacob's going to go the other. They're going to squabble for a long, long time. And then we get into verse 24 here. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. The first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment. So they named him Esau, which Esau means hairy. And he's also been called Edom, which means red. And this is actually going to be the name of his nation, of his city, whatever, nation, that we'll learn about later. And then verse 26. After this, his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth. So there we see 60. Married at 40, gave birth at 60. And Jacob means he grasped, because apparently that's how you named. Hey, that's funny. We were just talking about naming our kids earlier. Jacob means he grasped because he was grasping the heel. And it also means he deceived. So we're going to see a little bit how he can be a little bit trickery. All right, so verse 27, the boys grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was a quiet man staying among the tents. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. All right, so that part right there, parental favoritism. It can divide a house, and you see it. You can see it in even regular, I guess what you say, regular houses, but especially like when you got half brothers, half, step kids and all that it can really get hairy when you get into situations like that. So that's not going to help out in this situation either, that Isaac liked Esau and Rebekah liked Jacob more. But so Esau sounds like he's the strong country boy, okay, in this situation, and that sounds good to a lot of us in here. But Jacob was the smaller, more plain guy. He's the homebody. He was like, he was like the me. I just stayed at home and really could care less about going out and doing things. So let me read this. You can catch the biggest fish, shoot the biggest deer, climb the tallest mountain, or even win the most bar fights. Doesn't mean you're worth a plug nickel to the kingdom of God. So I thought that was pretty good, huh? I was putting it in these people here's terms. You what?
I understand all that.
That's right. But that was so good. I don't remember exactly how Rick worded it, but I kind of took some of what he said and I put the plug nickel in there because that's what my dad would always. You ain't worth a plug nickel. Which I don't even know what a plug nickel is, but apparently it ain't worth nothing. Or I think it was a wooden nickel a lot. Yeah, that was said a lot too. But I mean, that's good.
He said that to you a lot, did he?
Well, enough. You know what I'm saying?
It's sunk in.
Actually, I don't know if it was really said to me. He was actually a pretty good dad, so I can't complain. But yeah, so I mean that's a good way to do it. So like Esau's the big, strong country boy. Jacob's smaller, plain homebody, and we're gonna the mama's boy. And so Rick used this analysis. So he does the man church stuff for anybody that don't know it. But he's like, any of our pamphlets, website stuff that we have, he's like, we don't have guys out there showing like they're like been hiked up a mountain for 20,000 feet or whatever it is, or people out deer hunting, because that's the common culture. Like, hey, if you're a man, you can do that kind of thing. No, a man is one that has faith and can teach people the faith. I don't remember exactly the way he worded it, but that's a man to him. So that's why they intentionally try to keep that whole, you know, the outdoorsy kind of guy. He used a lot of sports analogies too. The football players, the tackle linebackers, keeps that kind of image out of his man church because that's not what he wants people to think when he thinks of a man. No, he wants them to think of a godly man, not just a worldly man. And I thought that was a pretty good point. It fits right along right here. And then I had wrote after that little statement, should be more worried about being a good father, a good husband, a good disciple of Christ, and also making disciples, learning scripture. All that's worth more than catching the biggest fish, shooting the biggest deer, or winning the most bar fights. I thought that was good to throw in there.
Does that mean if there's one big deer between you and I farm this year, you're just gonna let it go over to my?
I might just do that. I'll be like, that's got Bear's name on it. I'm gonna be the bigger man and just let him have it. It depends on whose family's the hungriest, you know.
Yeah, I got 3 kids.
Good call. Oh, shoot. All right, so verse 29. So here we're going to see the little trickery, little deceiving of Jacob. And when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country, famished. He said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished." That is why he was also called Edom. Let's see, 31. Jacob replied, "First, sell me your birthright." Now, does anybody really think like he is in there just starving to death? Like, no. Like right here, Esau is choosing food, okay, over his birthright. So, verse 31, Jacob replied, "First, sell me your birthright." And verse 32, it says, "Look, I am about to die." It's got to be an exaggeration. It's got to be. Esau said, "What good is the birthright to me?" So he's going to give up because he was the firstborn. So technically, legally, or whatever at the time, like he would have the birthright. But even though God said, and I'm assuming they probably don't know what God has said yet, even though God is going to change it, but to them, they probably don't know. So Esau's like, "I don't care. Just give me that food and you can have my birthright." So verse 33, but Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank, and then he got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright. Okay, I'm assuming through all this probably isn't the first time the birthright thing has been brought up. But here Jacob sees an opportunity because he his name means deceiver a little bit. So he sees an opportunity. Hey, I'm cooking. My brother's starving. He wants his food more than anything right now because apparently, I'm gonna die. So he sees the opening, and another kind of a funny thing, maybe in this situation, maybe we, all men should learn to cook because you never know when it could come in handy, get a birthright somewhere. But just say if Esau was more worried about the food, say food to him was a sin. If he's more worried about that sin in his life, just use it for an example, than he is for his birthright under Christ. Okay, so or basically take the birthright for repentance. So Esau had no remorse, okay, for giving up his birthright. Let's see, I got one other. Hebrews 12:16 says, "See that no one is sexually immoral, or," now get this, a big statement right here, "is godless like Esau. For a single meal sold his inheritance right as the oldest son." So over a single meal, that's coming from Hebrews. So we should not live the godless life like Esau. No matter what sin, in this case for Esau it was food. He'd rather have the food than his birthright. Our birthright comes from Jesus' redemption. But if we're still committing the same sins over and over without any remorse, just like right here, Esau didn't have any remorse. He didn't have any repentance over it. What did it say there? It says, so Esau despised his birthright. He could have cared less. He was more worried about that sin than he was his life. Just like we need to watch it in the same situation, that we're not abusing God's grace. We're not taking our birthright to Christ, the crucifixion of Christ, as just any old thing. Like, it'd be like, that sin's way more funner than this whole Jesus stuff. You got to ask yourself, do we still have a sin that keeps us from taking our birthright of redemption serious, just like Esau right here? And when Hebrews points it out right there, just godless. I mean, the writer of Hebrews, which nobody really knows who it is, but just comes out and says, like, he's a godless man. Godless man. For a single meal gave up his birthright. But it's no different than now. I mean, people reject Jesus over the simplest things. It could be as simple as just lying. I mean, you got a constant liar that somebody just can't help it, just does it over and over. They don't want to give up that for Jesus. And it could be anything. All right, that's all I got.
But are you classifying him giving up his birthright as sin?
No. I'm classifying the food as his. I was trying to make a metaphor. Like there he gave up for a meal. He gave up his birthright. Right. So I'm thinking our redemption. Okay, not giving up a sin for our redemption. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I knew what was going on up here. I wasn't getting it out very good.
Well, it's like Lot giving up, choosing the worldly things over the godly things.
That's right.
Yeah, that's a little different there.
Yeah. See, Russell just should be teaching that stuff, it sounds like.
You do a great job.
But yeah, I was trying to make the